We good? All right, welcome today to the webinar. Um, can you guys verify that the sound is okay and you can hear me all right? All right, that must mean that I was good. Welcome. Excited to be with you today. My name is Tony Litster. I am founder and creator of CureTheCraving.com, where we take people and families that are affected by pornography and we liberate them from this plague, helping them get back to healthy relationships and tapping into their spiritual potential. And I'm excited to be with you today to share a little bit of my opinion of what helps, what doesn't help in this issue of pornography. We're going to talk about how pornography impacts relationships and the impact it has on, particularly on men's views of women. Now, I want this to be somewhat informal because that's how I am. I'm just going to give it to you straight, and I need to start with my disclaimer that I am not a licensed doctor, licensed lawyer, physician, therapist, anything licensed of that nature. I don't have any degrees in what I'm going to talk to you about. My experience is based on I've spent the last decade studying personal development and learning what creates change in our brain. And most of my experience that I'm going to talk to you about today is because of mistakes I've made and challenges that I've had and learning how to get over those. And I've spent this last, at least 10 years, maybe 15 years in an intense study of personal development and what creates change in the brain. People have hired me from all over the world to help them go through processes, either in their business, in their marriage, in their addiction recovery, these different processes to help them get over that. And I happen to know what I'm talking about, not because I went to school or I read a textbook about the issue. I have also had an issue with pornography in the past. And, like a lot of the people that will go through a process like this, I was exposed at an early age to pornography. And what was, from my experience of it, as a teenager, most of my friends were into it. It's just what everybody kind of did. I had no idea there was any lasting impact. Had no idea it would affect my relationships in the future. Had no idea it would create cravings down the road. And what's interesting to me is to watch how few people are willing to come out and go, yeah, I had this issue as well, and here's what I did about it. I watched someone very close to me go through a devastating divorce a few years ago, and it was brought on because of pornography addiction that went unchecked, which led to an affair. And I've watched that family go through all kinds of hell as a result of this. And I decided at that time that I was not going to sit on the sidelines and watch people's lives fall apart. I was going to be part of the solution because I had steps that had worked in my life and in the hundreds of people that I had personally worked with. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that from that experience standpoint. And I want to bring it up in this setting because in the last 3 years, I've endlessly talked about this issue. And it's an issue that a lot of people don't really want to talk about. They don't want to, they don't want to bring it up. They don't know how to talk about it. And I'm excited for what they're doing here at pornharms.com, where they're getting the word out and they're shedding some light on the subject. But I've seen in other places a lot of misinformation about this issue and specifically about recovery and what recovery takes and what recovery means from this issue. And so I share my story as much as I was not really excited to share this story as I started this journey, but I realized it's the only way I can help people. And so, I got into pornography and at about 16 had some spiritual experiences and I put it behind me. And I went several years, probably 6 or 7 years without viewing it. But I find it fascinating now as I think back to it. But at the time it was miserable, it was awful, was that even though I hadn't looked for years and years and years, whenever my life would get stressful, I would have these really compulsive feelings to go back and look at pornography. And it seemed the misinformation that I often see in the market is, people will say, well, what you really got to do is just stop looking. And while I believe that that's important, and obviously it's a very unhealthy thing, I want to make any excuses around pornography and say that there's anything valuable about it at all. I don't think that there is. But to expect someone to simply quit and never have cravings for it again is insanity. It goes against the way our brain is wired. It's very similar. I spent this last weekend at a family reunion, and I had an uncle that had gotten addicted to prescription medications, and he was a very successful guy, multimillionaire, super bright, great dad, great husband. Like the guy had it together, had a surgery, got addicted to pain medications, and then went through terrible addictions. And he's been sober for 15 years. And sometimes he still has cravings for pain medications. He recently had a surgery a couple of years ago, and so they gave him some pain meds, and it absolutely put him back into this compulsive emotional cycle. Very similar to if someone has ever consumed alcohol or tobacco, that it is totally natural for their brain to crave those things later on. And so when we talk about this process of recovery, it's not so much altering the external behavior of viewing pornography or acting out or masturbating or any of those things. It's much, 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 much more about altering our inner behavior and how we process stress, how we treat our body, the kind of food that we eat, how we move our body, how we rest our body. And as we address recovery from that standpoint, it is absolutely possible not only to abstain from the behavior and stop looking, which is what we want for people to be able to do, but to actually have peace inside and to be in a place where they're not tormented by cravings. And I bring this up. It's not a very popular topic, not a very popular conversation. And my guess is people watching this webinar, some of the people you might be dealing with the addiction. There's a likelihood just because of the numbers involved. And some of you are on here because you so much dislike pornography and what it's done to your life and to other people's lives that you want to be part of this movement to speak out against it. And so I want to explain to you, because I don't see that many people out there in the market giving the reality side of what it's like to be on the recovery side of things, that it is not an overnight process, that it's not something that just goes away on its own. And so part of the reason I wanted to start this way is because I wanted to lead into talking about the statistics around this issue. If you read recent statistics, they say that somewhere between 50 and 70% of men have a problem with this. And that somewhere, like as far as if you look at statistics of who is actually viewing pornography websites, it's about 75% guys, 25% women. And so then we look at from the standpoint of the young people surveyed. And one of the surveys that I saw recently said that 9 out of 10 children ages 8 to 16 are exposed to pornography while doing homework on the internet. 9 out of 10. And so let's talk about what that really means. When someone sees pornography, particularly a guy, because they're already visually stimulated to start with, they have been, up until that point, teased by advertisers and by magazines and by movies with sexual images to sell things. And so they've already been teased over and over and over to be aroused by those images. And it leaves them with a place, especially teenage boys, leaves them in a place of curiosity to see more. And so when they actually view pornography for the first time, it is a brain chemical experience very similar to using cocaine. I had read about a study where they had taken someone that was a cocaine addict and they wired up their brain with electrodes so they could monitor brain progress, and they had that person view a movie of someone actually snorting cocaine, and it triggered the pleasure centers in their brain, released a whole bunch of brain chemicals. They then wired someone up and had them watch pornography, and it triggered the same brain chemicals. And so it's really easy for us to take a moral stance and go, this is bad, this is wrong, it's dirty, it's harmful, and it is all those things. But if we want to be part of the solution, we have to step out of that arena of just saying it's bad, it's wrong, it's dark, it's dirty, it's harmful, and we have to step into the arena of brain science and understand what it means to the person that has gotten hooked on this, even if they don't necessarily want to view it, what's going on in the brain chemistry in their brain. Because if you look at the statistics and 9 out of 10 kids are getting exposed to this, that means that as this next generation that's completely hooked up on the internet and electronic distraction, it's almost like an electronic pacifier that people have to have nowadays. They have to constantly be checking their phone, or they have to be listening to music, or they have to be on Facebook, right? 'Cause I think we're doing this on Facebook right now, right? So we're constantly plugged into this emotional pacifier that we sit there and it distracts us from our uncomfortable feelings that we're having. right? Does that make sense? Like we watch movies to distract ourselves. We watch sports to distract ourselves. We listen to music to distract ourselves from getting still and listening to what's actually going on inside. And if we haven't been still for a really long time, when we actually get still for the first time, it's not pretty. All our junk comes out, all our demons come out, all that kind of stuff comes out. So if 9 out of 10 of our teenagers are being exposed to this online, and one of the studies said that 73% of teenage boys ages 15 to 17 look at hardcore pornography at least once a month. That means that somewhere between 75 and 90% of our future fathers have a brain addiction. And it happens to be that pornography is the way they trigger those brain chemicals. And that also means, which look, it's repulsive. It's awful, right? I don't want to sugarcoat it. It is one of the most horrible things out there in our world today. It is so utterly destructive to relationships, to people. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff that Porn Harms puts out, and some of the letters of people that were abused, that that've been in the industry, and the terrible thing. It's awful, right? So it's really easy for us to throw anybody involved in it under the bus, including anybody that consumes of the product. The problem with that is that 90% of our future dads and 90% of future fathers are going to have this brain chemical addiction that they don't know what to do with, because everybody's saying to them, just stop, don't do it anymore. That's not how the brain works. Brain change takes time, and it takes replacing the chemicals that they've been getting. But the real part that I try and drive home is that if 90% of the guys are hooked on this, then that means that 90% of our daughters are going to marry guys that are hooked on this. And I have 2 daughters, soon to be 3, and I think about that, and I think what is the chance that of my 3 daughters that they will find someone and marry someone that does not have an addiction to pornography? And I'm a realist, and I think it's probably slim to none, maybe a 1 out of 10 chance. And so if that is the future that we're staring down, as much as we hate pornography and we dislike it and it's awful and it's disdainful and it's all those things, if the reality is that there is a plague that has affected, okay, so let's just say it's half the men or 70% of the men, maybe it's not 90% of the men, but it's affecting this giant percentage of our population, and throwing them under the bus doesn't help it go away at all. So I want to talk a little bit about this from the standpoint of, I've done some work recently with teenagers, and I've been talking to them about the impact that this has in their world. When someone views pornography, it triggers different chemicals in the brain. These are endorphins, which are the feel-good chemicals. And I read in one scientific study, and again, look, I'm not a scientist. I'm a realist. I teach people how to create change in their life. But I'm not a scientist. I haven't done research. I read a lot of other people's research. Some people are really good at like crunching numbers and researching. I'm really good at cutting to the chase and creating solutions that actually work. So I take their research. One of the researchers said that the endorphins released in the brain, like dopamine, is 100 times stronger than heroin. That means that when they view pornography, they're getting a rush of adrenaline because it's forbidden. They get a rush of serotonin, which gives them a false form of peace. When we feel good and peaceful and loved, that's when our brain is releasing serotonin. And they experience dopamine, which if someone uses like a hallucinogenic drug, they can experience dopamine. And so we're talking about brain chemicals that are as strong or stronger than anything on the market. And they are as available as clicking a mouse and getting a dose of this chemical. So this addiction is way more about the brain chemical addiction than it is about sex. It just happens to be that pornography is the way it stimulates those brain chemicals. And so the addict is emotionally depleted, and their brain seeks these chemicals, because here's the cycle that happens. Someone acts out compulsively, right? They experience this intense rush of brain chemicals, and then they feel down afterwards. Well, it would kill us if we kept experiencing those brain chemicals on that level, because it depletes the body's proteins and these complex minerals and all kinds of things. It depletes that when we experience these chemicals. We are not designed to continuously feel these things over and over and over. We can experience them in these peak moments, and then we go, and then there's always a crash. Always, 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 always. There has to be a crash afterwards. Chemically, it has to be there. So what happens is, teenage boy experiences this incredible brain fireworks thing. It's all forbidden. It's naughty. It's curious. It's all those things. And then he feels like crap afterwards. He feels awful. He feels dark because he has just depleted his brain's chemicals. Well, our brain is very similar to if we're experiencing these chemicals, our brain becomes somewhat numb to them. Sort of like if you work in your garden and you get calluses on your hands. The first day you're out in the garden, your hands are very sensitive, and every little thing pokes you and hurts you. And then after a few days, you start to develop these calluses on your hands, and you're left in a place where you don't feel as much. It's our body's defense mechanism. The brain is the same way. So the first time they go through the experience, this is the exact same for a food addict. It's the same for a drug addict, for alcohol, for tobacco, for pornography, any of these things that trigger these brain chemicals. The next time around, their brain has less receptors to feel these chemicals. And so what it requires is that they have a higher dose of the chemicals in order to get the rush again. And then each time they feel more depleted. There's a crash afterwards. And then what does their brain do? When our body feels exhausted, when our body feels tired or stressed, it's uncomfortable. And there's this gland in our brain, in our inner brain, called the hypothalamus gland. And the hypothalamus gland regulates our chemical balances. It regulates what's going on chemically in our body. And anytime that we get low, or we get too much stress, or we get exhaustion, the hypothalamus, chemically things get out of balance, and the hypothalamus goes, we got to get things back in balance. What's the fastest way that we can do that? And whatever we've trained our brain to do, it will crave. So if we've taught our brain that meditation, because this is one of the things I teach in the recovery process, a process of meditation, so you slow your body systems down and let them rejuvenate. So if we teach our brain, when things get out of balance, meditation will get us back in balance, then our brain will start to crave meditation. If we teach our body that practicing yoga, or going for a run, or taking a nap, or calling someone and connecting with them, or listening to some really uplifting music will get things back into balance, then our brain will crave that activity. Unfortunately, most of us, myself included, have not been taught really healthy ways to cope. And so what happens when our brain gets out of balance and we start getting a little bit jumpy and jittery, and our brain starts craving some kind of escape, it's generally going to be something that stimulates our system very, very quickly, like chocolate, or alcohol, or caffeine, or pornography, or some kind of escape that will quickly get things back into balance. And then we're good again. And so what happens is somebody that goes along, as a teenager, gets exposed to this, they don't have a clue what's going on. They just know that was intense, and then they felt awful, and they want to feel intense again. And they want to feel up again. Their brain craves it, and then they act out, and then they feel awful again afterwards every single time. You can't escape it. And for the recovering addicts, or the people that are on this training that have gone through this addiction, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Every addict wants to escape the down. They all want to escape the crash. They all just want to stay high. They want to stay at the top. But it doesn't work that way. And so as we go through this, we have this chemical imbalance that takes place in our brain, and we have this hunger and these cravings that kick on. And it's the other thing I want to talk about is cravings, because anybody that's been exposed to alcohol, that's exposed to drugs, that's exposed to anything intense in their body, your brain will crave it. When I was a teenager, I tried chewing tobacco, and I probably only did it maybe 10 times. Not that many. I didn't get hooked on it. I haven't done it for maybe 20 years, 22, 23 years. Right? So clearly, I don't have an addiction to tobacco. But occasionally when I'm at the gas station and I'll be buying some gas or whatever, and I'll see those cans of chewing tobacco, my body will have a little bit of an urge to be like, hey, go do that. Go get a dip. And I only did it like 10 times. So it's generally, when I experience cravings like that, it's generally because I'm either too tired, I haven't been eating well, I've been drinking caffeine, I've been overstressed in my body without any positive stress release, and I haven't been moving my body. And that, for me, is like the perfect recipe to have cravings. Well, what do cravings mean? Does it mean we're bad? Does it mean we're wrong? Does it mean we want something that doesn't serve us? No, it's our brain's signal to us to say, dude, you're out of balance. Get things back in order. So here's what happens to a teenage boy who gets stuck on this, which unfortunately is pretty much all our teenage boys. If we just get real about it and say that that's the case, that is the truth of what's happening in our market today, is that most of our teenage boys and a decent percentage of our teenage girls have this chemical expectation in their brain of intensity, and then they're always let down. And so then what happens is they go along for a little while experiencing this chemical rush, and then they start to say, well, instead of watching things on the screen, if I could really go do it, then I would finally feel satisfied. And they get in this place of endlessly being empty and always looking for something to fix them. And so if a young boy goes along like this, and a lot, I work a lot with Christian men, and so they'll have been brought up in a Christian home, and they're told, no sex before marriage, but they have developed this habit of pornography and masturbation, and so then they go into marriage expecting that marriage will make all of these cravings go away. They think that the cravings are there because they haven't had sex or they haven't had enough sex. And listen, look, if you're watching this webinar, I don't sugarcoat things. So we're going to say it like it is on here. So, for the faint of heart, I apologize, but this is the reality. And I found that by just speaking straight to it, we can actually get results. So this boy goes into the relationship and he looks to his wife to fix this monster. He has awakened this monster of cravings where his brain goes out of balance and it creates these incredible cravings to act out sexually because it's the only way his brain knows to get things back into balance. And so then he looks forward to his future relationship with his wife and he says, oh, well, once I'll be married, then I can have sex whenever I want, and it's going to make it all better, and it's going to then I'm good. It's going to be just fine. And the problem is that regular relationships don't give the kind of adrenaline that forbidden, just forbidden, impossible things, which is what pornography is. It doesn't give the same kind of brain fireworks. And so they're left in this place of getting into the relationship with this woman. They have all these cravings, and sex doesn't fulfill them. And there's this massive disappointment, incredible disappointment that happens. And because, see, this is the crazy part to me. If we could just be real about this and just talk about what's actually happening here, there's some incredible solutions. There's ways, and I'm saying this from my own personal experience, there are ways to deal with this monster craving, to learn to balance out your body and your mind and your spirit and manage your stress so that you don't have cravings all the time. Do you have them sometimes? Yeah, that's human nature. Just because I have cravings sometimes to chew tobacco doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It just is that I introduced that into my brain in a very intense way when I was, 14, 15 years old. And so sometimes my brain craves that. Similar to, I had a long drive last night, and I was tired, and my brain was like, dude, get some caffeine. And I didn't do it because I'm working on abstaining from that in my life. I don't like the impact it has. But my brain wanted it. Does that mean I'm bad? No. It's just the way our body and our brain works. And so if we can just be real about this, coming into a relationship, and we can get real with these guys who had this expectation that sex was going to fix them, and that developed this over years and years and years, that their only coping tool was acting out sexually. It was the only way they knew how to process life. Well, if we can just get real with them and explain to them what's going on in their body, what's going on in their mind, why they, what's happening within their inner world, within their spirit, and teach them tools of managing their stress, they can have a very happy marriage. But if they go into, the problem is we won't talk about this. We don't give any instruction to the young women that are going into marriage to say, listen, this is how a guy functions. Like biologically, this is kind of how his brain works. And this is what will help him to be happy and satisfied in the relationship. We don't explain this to young men and say, listen, this is how women are made up. They have these certain emotional needs, and you have to be really attentive to these emotional needs. And if you are, then everything else in the relationship works. But for some reason, we don't do that, knowing that 9 out of 10 of them have a pornography issue. We don't give either of them instructions. So they go into the relationship expecting that sex will fix them, and it won't. It's no different than the person who has a food addiction. And I know people get mad at me when I make this comparison between pornography addiction and food addiction, but chemically they are almost identical, and behaviorally they are almost identical. Someone has an impulse, they want that fix right now, and they cram some food to make that demon go away. And there's this, look, if you have a food addiction, let me ask you this question. Is there this inner voice in your head that says, if I could just get enough food, or if I could just eat the right kind of food, all of my problems would go away? Right? You look at Thanksgiving dinner and this big spread of food on the table and all these things, and you go, if I could just eat all that pumpkin pie, or if I could just eat all of those mashed potatoes, I could just eat all of that, that stuffing, and just eat it until I was totally satisfied and content and happy, then I would finally be enough. And we can laugh at that and we can go, no, that's ridiculous. You're going to be hungry in 3 hours. Well, it's the same compulsive story that someone who has a pornography addiction has going on inside of them. This emotion that says, if I can just have enough sex or the right kind of sex, then it'll finally satisfy me. And it's this ever elusive thing that will never, ever, ever, ever satisfy them. So they go into a relationship and they think sex will fix them. And it's a convincing emotion. It's just like someone who has a food addiction that says, food will fix me. And we know this. Like, we can all sit back and go, no, food wasn't intended to fix your emotions. Food was intended to give you nourishment and to have some enjoyment with it. It's not meant to fix you and make all your pain go away. There's not enough food anywhere on the planet to make all your pain go away. And it's the same thing with pornography. And so I bring this up from the standpoint of, I think if we can get real about this and educate ourselves on what's really going on, because we can have straight talk about it, then we can create solutions that actually work. And so one of the challenges these young men develop is they begin to see women as sex objects. They begin to see them as, basically they fantasize about what sex would be like with these women. And as long as we stay in this conversation of, hey, you should just stop. You should just end this behavior. We're just going to keep getting the same results we're getting, which is that most guys don't stop, and they're stuck in this irrational story that they think sex will fix them, and they end up destroying themselves in the pursuit of their fix, just like any drug addict would do. I had a conversation with my uncle yesterday, and he talked about when he went on a binge. He started with prescription drugs, and then he couldn't get any more prescriptions. And he said whatever the prescription drug was that he was using, it was very similar to heroin. And he ended up, here's this super, super smart guy, a genius. He was able to create all kinds of incredible things in his business and his life. He was super talented. He was an expert at languages, all of these things. And yet he got hooked on this, and he ended up using street drugs. And he said he ended up face down in a gutter in Las Vegas, Nevada, broke, and then eventually got thrown in jail because of his gambling debts. And he had burned through everything, and he had lost everything in the pursuit of trying to get a fix, of trying to make it go away. And then he began the long road of recovery, of taking those steps, of actually doing the right thing. As long as we keep trying to guilt and shame and use coercion or threats to change this behavior, we just make the person become a better liar. And as I look to the future, and I know that this enormous percentage of guys are going to look at women as a sex object, because that's what they've been trained through marketing to do, and they're not going to respect and honor and value the wonderful, unique, feminine gifts that women bring, the goddess in them, because they won't be able to get out of their own compulsive trying to get their stuff fixed cycle. And so I look forward to the future and I go, most guys are going to be caught in this lie, this very convincing emotional lie, and most girls are going to get in a relationship with a guy that's stuck in this. And so as long as we try to just keep shaming and guilting and condemning the people that have this problem, won't change anything. And I'm about real change. What I look forward to in the future is that we can just go, we as a culture, and a lot of the people I work with are Christian, and we look at this and we say, from a standpoint of knocking people off of their spiritual game, trapping people spiritually, this is the most calculated, cleverly designed trap history has ever seen. Not just me. Because it takes people and it emotionally locks them into this and chemically locks them into this compulsive cycle. And then it leaves them hungry all the time, and they can never satisfy that hunger. And the only way to satisfy it, they have to actually, there's a few things that I want to talk about. Taking a look at the body, and I'll say this right now. At curethecraving.com, we have programs and resources to educate people on this, and we have made most of our programs and resources free. We've got a couple of paid products that you can purchase, and that helps us fund our nonprofit. But most of it's for free. So we've got a program for parents. We've got an ebook for parents. It's free. It talks about that most parents are doing the wrong thing. They're making the wrong choice here. And in this ebook, it shows them the steps that they can take to actually help their kid heal instead of just become a better liar until they leave the house. We've got a 7 CD series, totally free for parents, that actually helps handhold them through the process of talking to their teenager. And I do some of that talking with some real straight talk that most parents are most parents get a little red in the face when it comes time to talk about this. And so I actually talk to the teenager and help break the ice. We've got a program for wives of addicts. And my wife and I made this from the standpoint of, it has very little to do with the pornography addiction itself. It has mostly to do with helping women deal with the terrible burden that they carry if their husband or boyfriend has a problem with this. The betrayal, the doubts, the anger, all that emotion that it's so weird to me when I look at culturally what we're doing, that nobody can talk about this issue even though most of our families are dealing with it. And so most of the women are supposed to just bottle this up, supposed to just close their mouth, not say anything. They can't talk to their friends about it because it would expose their husband. They can't talk to anyone at church about it because it would make them look like, what's the matter with them? They married somebody that has a problem with this. It's insanity what we're doing to each other. If we can just get real and stop hiding and come out in the open and say, we've got a plague on our hands. It's affecting millions and millions of people. And there's a solution to it. So in this program, my wife and I, on a weekly basis, we do a call that you can join anonymously and for free. All it takes is an email address. Just sign up, and anonymously you'll get an email with the call in it every single week that's going to take you step by step through this process of healing your wounds. We're not going to, your husband can go join the recovery program I'll tell you about in a second. And that recovery program is available for men and women. Most of the people in there are men, but we have women in there as well. We do this from the standpoint, I wanted my wife to be involved in this so that she could speak to this from a woman's standpoint of how to deal with the emotions that come up in a relationship. And look, we got, we came from this place of our relationship being broken, of on the edge of divorce, and both of us running awful patterns on each other, treating each other poorly, to a place where we are today, where we have this incredible partnership and friendship and romance, and we're both just as grateful as we could be to be in this relationship with each other. And we take you through those steps of how to get back to that place. That's a free program. It's an anonymous program, because I'm realizing, well, this is what we saw. We had to make our stuff anonymous so that no one would know that you happen to be dealing with this, even though most of the people on your street are also dealing with this. It's the strangest thing. And then the recovery program we have for guys, it's a 9-month group. Well, it's not just guys, men and women that have a pornography issue. It's a 9-month group coaching program where once a week you get on the phone in a group format, and I'll talk you step by step by step through this process of dealing with your physical body, slowing your body down, learning how to put proper nutrition in so you don't have those crazy cravings, slowing it down, learning to move your body. We're going to talk about the mindset and that inner chatter. You may not know this. Listen, if you've got a pornography problem, you'll know this, but anybody that deals with compulsive sexual behaviors, men or women, what happens in their mind is there's this period of time when the cravings come on, they come on really strong. And the hypothalamus part of their brain, which is sort of like the brain stem, will chemically shut out the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where we think about consequences. So their ability to think about consequences literally gets shut down. And then they act out compulsively. And then after they've acted out compulsively, almost immediately, the chemicals turn back off and their conscious comes back and the shame kicks in. And this inner dialogue happens where they go, I am the biggest piece of crap on the planet. If anyone knew this about me, there's no way they could ever love me. That's their inner dialogue. And that inner dialogue then leads them to try and control things, try and do things extra good, make up for being a bad person. And that control puts them out of balance. And as soon as they get out of balance, their brain kicks on the cravings, right? We talk about that. And those cravings come on, and then the shame kicks in again. They go, I can't believe I'm craving the thing I said I would never do again. And they resist it, and they resist it, and they resist it. And instead of doing something healthy in that moment, instead of actually getting the need met, what do? They beat themselves up, they shame themselves, and that leads to further cravings, and then eventually their brain shuts off their prefrontal cortex, and they can't think about the future, and they act out like an animal. And then it turns back on again. In this group recovery program, we are going to go step by step by step, 1 week at a time, starting at the beginning of this process of recovery, of learning what to do in that moment, how to choose something that will actually get your needs met in that moment instead of continuing to go back and basically eating Twinkies and thinking you're going to get nutrition from it. That's what this compulsive behavior is very similar to. So it's 9 months. It's anonymous. All you do is put in an email address and you can join the weekly calls. If you can't join us on the phone, we'll email out a download of the call the next day so that you can participate anywhere, anytime, for free, anonymously. I am so tired of people saying that there are not resources available and there's not a way to overcome this. That's bullcrap. There are resources, and we've made them available for free. We have some paid resources that help fund everything that we're doing for free. We also have a program for Christians, a 7 CD series. It's also free. You can download it. It educates this from a Christian perspective, and we have an LDS version to kind of talk about aspects of the LDS culture. So we've got all these resources for you. It seems like this. We have two options. We can just throw people under the bus, shame them, make them wrong, reject them. And what this does is it keeps them in hiding and it keeps the problem perpetuating. I am so excited for those of you that are on this call because you are, it's option 2, which is get real about this. Maybe we have to face some of our worst fears about this. Maybe we have to change some of our belief systems about it, but we can become part of the solution. And we can step up and be a light to those who are trapped in this thing. So what are the steps that we can do to become part of the solution? First and foremost, you got to educate yourself on what's going on. Understand why someone got hooked, how they got hooked, and let's end this conversation of making people wrong. I don't want to make any excuses for pornography. Is it healthy? No way. It's awful. It is one of the darkest things that exists on our planet. It exploits women. It screws up men and how they view women. It traps people in this addiction. I'm not trying to make an excuse or make an apology or try to downplay the absolute destructive, damaging effect of pornography. I just want us to start to take a look at the people involved and see that they got hooked, generally not really knowing what they were getting into. I mean, think about this in your life. Think about the worst thing that you've ever done. I know we don't like to go there, right? If you take a look at, or things that you might have regretted in your life. Maybe we don't have to look at the worst thing you ever did. Did you have any idea the price you would have to pay? Did you have any idea how painful it would really be for the things that you got into? I was at a family reunion this week, and so one of my cousins is having some substance abuse problems. He's been smoking pot and getting drunk. And I was looking for an opportunity to talk to him about mistakes I made in my childhood, my teenage years, and the price I had to pay. I had no idea that it would take me a decade of hell, of dealing with all the stuff that I stirred up in my soul to get to a place of healing. Now, I wouldn't go back and change it because of who I've become in this process, but I couldn't wish it on my worst enemy. to have to go through that. So you think about the things that you've done and the mistakes you've made. You had no idea the price you were going to have to pay, did you? You had no idea how heavy the consequence and how long-lasting the impact would be. The people that have gotten caught in this trap of pornography, they didn't know what they were getting into. If they would have known, they would have avoided it like the plague that it is, right? So first and foremost, we educate ourselves on what's going on. Take a look at, understand why people get hooked, how it works, and then really understand what works to overcome this. Because just telling someone to stop will not work. Just telling someone to pray in most cases won't work. I don't want to take away God's ability to heal someone, but I spent years and years having cravings. I hadn't looked at pornography for years, and I was plagued by cravings for it. And I would pray and I would say, God, please, just why? Why do I have to have this? Take this thing away from me. I hate this. Why did you let me get into this in the first place? I wanted to play the victim. And I asked God over and over and over and over and over to take it away from me. And I got to this place where when I was in college, I could feel that I was starting to relapse. It'd been about 7 years since I'd looked at porn, and I started to notice the little signals that addicts don't like to look at. We like to ignore those things in ourselves. But I saw it, and it scared the crap out of me. And I finally said, look, God, if you're not going to help me, I'm going to find help. And it was very interesting because I started to go into areas that I'd never considered before. I started to explore possibilities for healing I'd never considered. And in those possibilities, and in those kind of like weird alternative ways, I found God. And I thought it was so interesting because God basically led me into that place of healing. But what I wanted to say, come on, God, just make it go away. Take it away. Make it stop. And God basically said to me, I will make it stop as soon as you start living natural law. I will make the cravings go away as soon as you start treating your body the way it was designed to be treated. Right? You learn to slow it down. You learn to put the right kind of food in it. See, I thought I could sit there and pound Mountain Dew all day long, cookies and all this, and chew tobacco and do these different things. And then I could just like not have to pay a price for that. I thought I could spike my system like crazy, not sleep much, overwork all the time, tons of stress, tons of distraction, loud music, lots of movies. I thought I could just screw with my body and not pay a price. But what I learned was, if I want these cravings to go away, I have to take a look at slowing my body down. I have to take a look at the food that I'm eating and eat food that's unrefined and unprocessed and doesn't spike my system and leave me in cravings. I had to learn how to rest my body. I wasn't very good at slowing down. I was very good at being active, but I didn't know how to slow down and be still. And I had to learn how to move my body and actually exercise it. And as I started to get that in order, then I saw that I had these screwed up internal belief systems. My inner dialogue was awful. I used to say the worst things to myself. I'd look in the mirror and just be like, "You're the biggest dirtbag. You're a piece of," well, let's say you're. Right? I think we probably have young people on here. Well, maybe not. I would say the worst things you can imagine to myself. So I realized I had to take a look at this inner dialogue, this destructive idea that I was running in my mind over and over and over, and transform that, replace it with the truth of who I am. One of the things we do in our programs is we create a affirmations program for you, where we take a recording of your voice, where you say a series of beliefs to yourself, and then we mix it with Mozart music, because Mozart music has been shown to stimulate the left and right sides of our brain while we listen to it. And you listen to this over and over, morning and night for 15 minutes, until it transforms the truth of who you are. The affirmations that I like to listen to, they say, I am a child of God with infinite worth. I am always taken care of. I'm always more than enough. The worth of my soul is great. I now fully accept myself. My body's now in perfect balance. I'm always healthy and strong. Everything I touch prospers. Other people experience their worth when they're in my presence. And so I had to replace that inner dialogue with the truth of who I am. And once I replaced that inner dialogue, it led me back to this place of realizing, I took care of the body and I took care of the mind, and I needed to take a look at the spirit. But I had bought into some stories that people had told me. I think that they were trying to modify my behavior and scare me into behaving myself. And they said, you're not worthy of God's help. You're a bad boy. If you have sexual feelings, you're naughty and you're wrong and you're dirty and God's mad at you. And so I disconnected from God. And what I encourage people to do in this program is to take a look at, where did your beliefs about spiritual things come from? And I looked at mine, and about 99% or maybe 98% of them came from what I call the mama said people, right? Mama said God's mad at you, right? About 98% of my beliefs about God were mama said beliefs, beliefs other people had pushed on me. And then I had this little 2% window of times when I had slowed down enough and connected with my Creator and had an undeniable experience of being loved. And so what I had to learn how to do was, even if I had cravings, even if I had impulsive desires to do something that I knew was out of alignment spiritually, I had to start to invite God into my life and learn to connect and listen. And that cravings became a gift. And that gift was, they became a reminder that I needed spiritual connection. And that may be the only way. I look at this. I was talking to a guy that I'm coaching on the phone today. I do a little bit of one-on-one coaching with people. And I said, this may be the only thing that would get you to remember God in your life on such a regular, recurring basis that you just return to Him and have this connection. And so the cravings can become a gift to waken you up and to keep you awake and recognize your need for that. So we take a look at body, mind, spirit, and the stress. And then the last step is stress management, because we operate on habits. Every one of us is habit driven. We're driven by the habits in our life. We're driven by just how we act on an autopilot basis. And so if we want real change, you could get your body in alignment. You could physically learn how to move it and eat good food. You could even transform the way you talk to yourself and about yourself. You could connect spiritually. But if you don't manage your stress with new habits, what is guaranteed to happen is that as things get too stressful, guess what your brain's going to do? It's going to crave whatever outlet you've taught it to crave. And you're going to want to go back to that place, right? And so we have to create habits of stress management. Now, in order to create a habit, we have to do something every single day for about a month. And it won't feel good at the beginning. Creating new habits is sort of like, you've probably seen this with the space shuttle when the space shuttle takes off. Sorry about that. I'm just moving out of the sunlight. When the space shuttle takes off, they have those giant fuel tanks, right? And it takes off into orbit, and about 80% of the fuel for the entire trip is used in those moments of takeoff, right? That's when the 80% of the fuel is exhausted during takeoff. And then after that, it can travel tens of thousands of miles on the rest of the fuel. Well, in our life, anytime we want to implement a new habit, there's this massive resistance from our brain because change is dangerous for our brain. Our brain is going to want to go back to the way we managed our chemicals over and over and over. And eventually, if we continue and we're consistent with the new habit, our brain will go, okay, fine. This must be the new way we are. Okay, this is the new balance. This is the new equilibrium. And so through these processes, all the programs that I teach and that I share with people, we talk about implementing habits and intentionally, 1 month at a time, creating habits so that you manage your stress differently. If we have too much stress, our brain will crave adrenaline. If our brain's craving adrenaline all the time, we're going to have to spike our system with caffeine and with refined sugars and with entertainment that creates adrenaline, all these different things. And so if we can balance out our stress as a habit, as a way we live our life, then we don't have to have cravings because we don't have things out of balance. So these are the steps that we do. And look, this is my view. We're all children of God. And it's to me, it doesn't matter what spiritual or religious background that someone happens to cling to. We're on this planet, every one of us. We showed up in a body we didn't create, to parents we didn't choose. We showed up in a culture and a religion and a time and a history and all these different things that weren't our choosing. And people said to us repeatedly, you are, you are, you are. And we bought into it and we said, I am. And from that childhood story, we developed this idea of ourselves, of who we are. And it's my personal belief that idea is simply a story. that the truth of who we are is much, 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 much greater than we can comprehend. And because of that, we are all worth saving. It's the truth of who we are. And when we can tap back into that truth, we start to see others for their greatness. And we can recognize they might be asleep to the truth of who they are. They might be caught in trying to fix their emotions through very destructive behaviors. It doesn't take away the truth of who they are. Our boys and girls of this next generation are getting trapped in the most cleverly designed trap we've ever seen in history. And the girls especially are getting hurt in countless ways. They need our help just as if they were affected by the plague as well. It's not just happens to be a lot of guys that have this problem, but the women are being affected negatively as well. And they need our help. When we can step out of just making people wrong and start to take the steps of recovery ourselves and go through this process of getting our lives back in alignment with natural law, we can save so many marriages and so many families. So I really appreciate your time today. I invite you to consciously step up and become part of the solution. To do that, you need to educate yourself really well about this topic so that you really understand why people are getting hooked, what it's like to be hooked, and how to actually take the steps of recovery. There's so many millions of people that are waiting for you to step up and to take on this role. So I invite you to come over to curethecraving.com. Again, we've got the ebooks for parents. We've got the 7 CD series for parents. We've got the 4-month group coaching program for wives of addicts or girlfriends of addicts. We've got the 9-month group coaching series for addicts and for recovery. And then we've got the free CDs for Christians, and then there's an LDS version of that as well. I invite you to go and get those resources, let other people know. It's affecting so many of us, and we need to open our mouths and be a part of the solution. So I appreciate you being on here. I'm not sure if I can handle the technology side of this. We're about to find that out. But I do have a couple of minutes because I know we planned on 60 minutes. We got a couple minutes for questions if people want to give questions, but a lot of times they don't. So I understand if people don't have questions. So there was a question, where are the free resources that I'm talking about? It's at curethecraving.com. CURETHECRAVING, curethecraving.com. And if you go to the products page, that's where you can sign up for any of the free programs. And then if you like there's a couple of CD series on the free programs page that we have there. So there's a question here from Michelle. She says, what advice do you have for spouses whose husband is struggling with porn but not wanting to get help? This is tough. This is really tough. I'm gonna suggest that you keep your focus on working on improving your self-image, and that you do the work so that you're not taking his behavior personally. One of the biggest challenges that women have is that if their husband looks at porn, then they make it mean something about them. That they say, well, I must not be sexy enough, or my body must not look like the people he sees on the screen, or there must be something wrong with me, or I'm not lovable, right? So it triggers all of these really deep emotional wounds. And what I would suggest for you is that you actually work on those wounds, and that you work to get some healing in that area. And that 4-month program my wife and I put together is all about that. It's all about shifting that emotional state and getting back to the truth of who you are. And as you get into a healthier place, it's going to help you have a little bit more perspective on his behavior, because he's doing this because he feels really empty inside. And he's trying to get a fix. He's desperately trying to make pain go away in his life. That's why they keep going back to this. And the further someone gets into this behavior, the less fulfilling it gets. There is never enough pornography or sex to satisfy someone. Just like there's never enough food to satisfy a food addict. It will never make their pain go away. And so when you can see it from that vantage point, instead of seeing it from the standpoint of saying, what's wrong with me? Did I choose someone wrong? Did I make a mistake in choosing him? If you get back to the truth of who you are, that you're a child of God with infinite worth, and you begin to seek your own direction in, and look, I don't know, some people don't have spiritual backgrounds. I totally get that. I'm going to suggest that you start to have a conversation with your creator, whatever that looks like, and that you ask for a couple things specifically. Number one, for you to experience healing. And I can promise you from my own experience of things that happened in my childhood, from my wife's experience, that when we ask with our heart for healing, that we are led in the direction of finding that healing. And it may take us in places we never expected to go. I know that was the case with all the things I've learned about recovery happened. I had to break my old ideas of what recovery meant in order to actually start to go down the path of recovery. So it may take you in a place that you may not expect it to take you, but spiritual healing is available. And then number two, that you seek personal revelation in what to do with your husband, whether that's to stay with him, to leave him, to how to approach him, how to speak to him. And the less wounded you show up in this relationship, the more space it gives him to heal, because he's hurting tremendously. Anybody that's addicted to this stuff is hurting, and they're trying to make their pain go away, and it never satisfies. It's never enough. Somebody gets done looking at this, and literally minutes later, it's this emotion of, well, the next time it's going to finally satisfy me. And it's this endless abyss, this endless trap. So even though he doesn't want to stop at this point, the healthier you get, the more it creates a space where he may be able to start to get some healing. But regardless, it's important for you to take care of yourself in this. We can't force someone else to heal. We can't force someone else into recovery. They have to get to a place where it really just kind of sucks and they want to change. And so I would encourage you to do your personal healing work, and then and it'll allow you to serve him in a different way, and just be able to show up and see him in his greatness, even though he's asleep. But if you show up wounded, it's impossible to see him in his greatness, because he's, the experience is that he's hurting you over and over and over and over, right? And so until you've stepped aside and got some healing in your wounds, it'll be very difficult for you to actually support him without getting wounded again. So my encouragement is that you work on yourself for a while. And as you do that, it sets an example of a greater peace of mind that he'll be drawn to. The other aspect is to take a look at your own addictions. And this is interesting. And I hope you actually can hear this and take it the right way. I work with a lot of people that point to the other person, especially parents. When I work with their teenager and the parents are like, well, just last week, the mom is on antidepressants and eats really unhealthy and is checking out of life through her prescriptions. That's how she copes with life. And her son is checking out of life through his alcohol use. And she wants him to fix his alcohol use. And it was really hard for her to hear that he learned the same coping mechanism that she passed on to him, which was, when life gets too hard, you go to the bottle. She goes to a pill bottle, he goes to a beer bottle. And she had a really hard time receiving that. And so if you want to experience what's possible in your life from your own personal recovery and healing from these wounds, I would encourage you to do your own work and take a look at your own addictions, as hard as that is. None of us want to admit that we have addictions. And the more you can look at that, the healthier it'll be. The other thing you might suggest is see if your husband will listen to some of my stuff, or watch maybe my I have some videos I did, straight talk videos. I think it's at pornographyaddiction.org. We put up those straight talk videos. And what happens when an addict talks to another addict, or a recovering addict talks to another addict, the message hits home a lot harder than if their wife nags them about their recovery. So that would be my encouragement. And I got a couple questions here on the screen I'm going to try and answer. And I apologize. I usually have someone helping me with the technology. So somebody says, where can we get the free material? So I'll put the curethecraving.com. I'll put that up on the screen. Curethecraving.com. You can get it there. It's either on the products page or the free resources page. And will this broadcast be available later? I don't know. Michelle's going to have to answer that one, so I'm not 100% sure. So let me see what the next question is. We got a couple more minutes here. Tony, is it possible to have a healthy, normal sexual relationship with your spouse after overcoming addiction to porn? I mean, is it possible to feel like the relationship is truly about the two of you and not this ideal women in porn? Okay, so here's an interesting, it's a really good question. And I'm going to give you a very blunt answer. When someone has a porn addiction, and this is the aspect that's funny because people see me talk about this and they're like, dude, I can't believe you're saying this stuff. But it's true. Just people are just too afraid to tell you what really goes on inside. So when a boy gets into pornography, when he masturbates, he imagines some scenario in his mind. He fantasizes about some scenario in his mind. And a big part of the experience is not just a physical experience. It's also this, the brain is the strongest sex organ that we have, our imagination. And so the problem is that they then train their brain that they have to imagine something kind of extreme or forbidden or alluring or tempting or whatever in order to have the release, for lack of a better term. There's other terms, I just won't say them on here. So they imagine, they train their brain that they have to be imagining some other sexual scenario in order to have a sexual release. And so they think when they get married that they're going to be able to have sex with that other person, but they have trained their brain to think this way of that they have to, think of something crazy or whatever in order to have a release. And so what happens in the relationship, and I talk to teenage boys about this, that if they've developed this muscle of using their imagination and fantasizing, that once they get married, that muscle has been developed and it will continue. So they'll be having sex with their spouse and they will be thinking about having sex with someone else, essentially using their spouse to masturbate. And what happens then is the woman can pick up on this. Women are very intuitive. And even though the guy may physically be present, they emotionally feel let down because they feel like there was something lacking, like it wasn't there. And then the woman doesn't want to have sex because it leaves her feeling degraded and used. And then the guy goes through the story of, well, my wife's withdrawing from me, she doesn't want to have sex with me, and the guy blames his wife. When really it's his problem. It's his crap. And it's his muscle that he's developed of using fantasy. And then the woman doesn't want to have sex because she doesn't feel emotionally close. And so then the guy goes back to porn because it's Twinkies. It's the illusion of getting the thing that he wants, but he never can get it. And porn has no rejection, right? So there's this fantasy he gets to play out that there's this woman that would just accept him exactly how he is and not reject him. Just this whole fantasy side of things. So what can you do about that? Well, what I found for myself personally is that I got to a point in my recovery where I wasn't looking at porn. So that was good, right? That's a step of things. And then I realized that there was this next level of recovery where I had to try and work on having my inner world match up with my outer world, have alignment between my internal world and what I was intending to create in the outer world. And a big barrier to that was fantasy. And we all fantasize. We just sometimes choose different outlets for fantasy. And it's funny, I'm putting together a video. It's so edgy that I've kind of been on the hesitation. So you've already watched this webinar. You can imagine how edgy something must be if I'm not actually willing to say it on a video. It's pretty edgy. So basically what it is saying how chick flicks are girl porn. And women get so mad at me for saying this. How can you, chick flicks are not porn. Okay, let's talk about what is porn. Is it just the nudity? And then women are like, yes. Okay, well, what about in chick flicks when they have sex scenes and it shows everything but the genitals or the breasts? What's the difference? You're watching someone have sex, right? So what is porn to a guy? Porn to a guy is something that can arouse him and stimulate him and make him feel good, to release the brain chemicals of feeling loved and feeling good. That's what porn is. So it can be a magazine at the checkout stand at the grocery store. I didn't start by looking at porn. We stole the neighbor's Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. That was how it all started, and it released the same brain chemicals of feeling incredible, right? So it doesn't have to be something nude to be porn. Well, what do women get from chick flicks? Women get this pseudo emotion of being in love and romance. What is that? Brain chemicals, right? So they have figured out, look, I've seen a gazillion chick flicks with my wife. I make fun of her about this all the time. It is a way to trigger the brain chemicals of feeling loved and feeling connected. And so it ends up being an experience of experiencing essentially porn for women that way. So back to this question of, is it possible to have the relationship be about you? Okay, so this is what I was going to say. And I do a whole video series on this about breaking fantasies and some techniques. If you guys want to stay on the webinar, we don't necessarily have a time limit on this, so I'll just explain this to you right now. So here's the deal. When we fantasize about anything, this is men and women, this is everything. Think about what's happening. We imagine some scenario in our mind, and then we start to feel this low dose of those chemicals, right? It makes us aroused, makes us excited, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a sexual fantasy. Any type of fantasy, we create this little dose of the emotion of those chemicals, right? And then we have to hyper focus on that fantasy. We got to hold it there in order to keep getting that trickle in dose of those chemicals. We have to really use a ton of focus in order to keep that fantasy alive and to nurture it and to move it along. But it always leaves us hungry. Why? Because it's never enough of the chemical to satisfy. So what I realized in my own life was fantasizing was actually creating cravings. And when I saw that connection between fantasizing and cravings, I went, oh my gosh, I got to end this. I don't want cravings. But fantasizing is fun because it makes us feel good in the moment. It makes us feel like warm and love and all those different things, right? So it doesn't have to be about sex either. It can be emotional fantasies, right? A lot of chick flicks play off of these emotional fantasies. So what I found was I have to do the following to break the fantasy. And this leads into answering your question. In a normal sexual relationship with your spouse, can it be between the two of you? It can, with one condition, that the guy has to learn to be present during sex. And in order for that to happen, he has to feel safe, because men feel safe after sex, not before sex. Women need to feel safe before sex. So there's this dichotomy, this weird back and forth that makes relationships dynamic and challenging. But if a guy can re-exercise this muscle of fantasy, and then he can actually be with his wife during sex. And in that case, yes, you can have that relationship. So how do you break fantasy? Here's the things that I've learned. First, you got to open your eyes. If you keep your eyes closed, it's too easy to follow that path of least resistance of nurturing the fantasy and playing it out. Right. So number one, you got to open your eyes. Number two, I learned this technique from a soldier coming back from Iraq, and he was telling me about these horrible things he had seen in war. I mean, just awful things he had seen. And I said, how do you deal with this, man? Like, aren't you haunted by these images? And he said that the psychologist there in the Army taught him about this technique, and I've read about it online as well. And it goes something like this. Look, I'm not a brain scientist. I don't know the exact chemistry of it or whatever, but you look from side to side, 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 and then look up and down, up and down, up and down, and side to side. And what's happening is, in order to hold a fantasy in place, you have to really hyper focus on it. You got to keep it so clear and hold the focus and play it out in order to release the brain chemicals, right? So what happens is, if your eyes open and you begin to look from side to side to side to side, it's accessing different areas of your brain, and it literally starts to break up the image of the fantasy, right? So you do that for a bit. You do that maybe like for 30 seconds. And then what I like to do is I like to find something to focus on that I didn't notice before, and I focus on it down to the details, like down to the blade of grass. Like I'm sitting here in this office and I'm looking at my phone, and I didn't know that I had this little bubble on the screensaver of my phone, and I'll like pick something super tiny, or I'll be like, wow, I got some dirt under my fingernails, or I didn't notice I cut my finger, and I'll find something to hyper focus on. Why? Because our brain can only hold a focus on one thing intently at a time. Think about this when you dream, right? You're going along and you imagine some scenario in your dream, and you feel the emotions as if it's real, like this thing's going on. It feels so real, and you're living it and you're feeling it, and then all of a sudden something captures your attention. And now you're focusing on this new thing, and you're holding the emotion, and you're feeling that thing, and it becomes the the new emotion. And what did you do? You just let go of that first emotion. You didn't try to go, I will now stop feeling the first emotion. No, you just pick something new to focus on. And that new focus gave you this new emotion. And so same thing with fantasy, right? We open our eyes, we do the side to side, up and down, and then we pick something to focus on like we never had seen before. Some detail, some abstract, some sound, right? I hear a ticking clock. I can hear cars, the freeway's near. I can hear cars on the freeway. Right? So there's these things that I had blocked out. And you want to focus on something new and hold your focus there. And then the fourth step is I like to pray. And I just have a conversation with God. And I was brought up sort of to think that if I was feeling like acting out sexually, that I was probably not worthy to talk to God. And I just think that's a bunch of crap. I talk to God at every point of this process, and that is a big key to the recovery, is that you begin to have this be this conversation with your Creator, whatever that looks like for you. Just tap into that in the moment. So, yes, you can have your relationship be between the two of you if the guy relearns the muscle of not fantasizing and choosing not to. And now the benefit to this, because I tell people this and they're like, I can't fantasize. You gotta be kidding me. That's like my favorite pastime. Got it. That makes sense. You've been doing it your whole life. It's how you cope with your emotions. If you stop fantasizing consciously as your new habit, over a couple of months, your cravings will go down dramatically. And that's huge. That's a big piece. So let me look at a couple of other questions here, if that's okay. Michelle, I hope it's okay that I'm going long. Guy says, my wife told me to choose her or the porn. She stood up to someone who had lost his humanity and said, change now. I'm assuming that means that helped him by having her stand up. Another person says, do you have suggestions for getting teens and young adult children to be willing to talk about pornography? I'd answer that in two ways. Number one, I would say if it's someone that hasn't been exposed to pornography and doesn't have an issue with it, then it's going to be a little bit different conversation. You're going to talk about the dangers of it, similar to, like you've seen those commercials about meth, where it just shows somebody that's so crazy, insanely jacked up, like, scratching bugs out from underneath their skin and that kind of stuff. I think those are awesome commercials, because I have a dear friend that had a meth problem and he hung himself last year. And so I've seen that in real life. I've taken him to the hospital, right? I've been there. Those commercials are so effective because they go, you don't even want to touch it. If you can talk to them about what this will do to their relationships and to their life, and allow them, and don't try to scare them from it or make it so forbidden that it becomes alluring. Just have a straight talk like they do about meth. And it becomes much less appealing. The other part of it is if you can just talk openly about sex and stop making it some crazy forbidden thing. Look, I don't know if anybody told you this, but you showed up on this planet because two people had sex. I'm not sure if you knew that. I don't know why we can't talk about it. It's the most natural aspect of life. It's as natural as eating and sleeping, right? We have to have that for the species to continue. So let's change the conversation. The whole world's talking about inappropriate, unhealthy sex. Let's be the ones that talk about healthy sex. So that's number one. Number two is, if they have a problem with porn, go get the free 7 CD series, because that'll give you some pointers. It's on curethecraving.com. You can get that and download it, and that'll help them. So this guy that his wife stood up to him, he just also posted, when someone takes the porn goggles off, meaning gets out of the fantasy and expecting sex to fix them, having sex changes to making love, and that allows emotions into the bed. Now, for the women whose husbands have a problem with this will be the most difficult aspect of you helping your husband. But if you can get to a place where he can express himself and what's actually going on and be real with you without being punished, it'll go a long ways. The challenge is that for most women, they're so emotionally hurt by this. Rightfully so. I get it. I get it as much as I can get it, right? I don't know that I actually get it, but if he can't show up real, it's going to be hard for him to recover. And so that's why I say it's important for you to do your work of healing, and then you can start to do this with him. A couple other questions. Um, okay, so can you talk more about the term porn addiction? Most people think that addictions mean you're obsessed or can't function without it. They don't get the point that even watching it once in a while affects you deeply. Could you please talk about this for a bit? Um, Porn addiction is a funny one, and we use that term very, very loosely, saying that it's an addiction, because like I had a call a couple weeks ago with a guy, has a very successful business, run a business for 30 years, done very, very well with it. And the way he copes with life is by looking at porn every day. And that's part of his coping stuff. He does it at his office. He goes to work, looks at porn, and then he has a very functional day. It's like his pill for the day of how to function. So someone can have a totally functional life, functional relationships to some degree. His marriage has no emotional connection, and that's because he's fantasizing and connecting emotionally through porn. So he can't show up with his wife because he's afraid if she really knew him, then she couldn't accept him. And again, this is the thing I say about with women. I know this is a hard thing I'm telling you. It's a difficult thing, but if you can get emotionally healthy enough that your husband can show up and be real and talk openly about what he's going through, you actually get your husband back. And there's a higher likelihood he'll actually be able to see the impact of the porn and start to do things instead of it and start to make changes. My guess is he's tried to quit before. Most guys have. And the traditional ways of quitting just flat out don't work. So it makes it almost impossible. And so then they give up and they go, well, I just can't change this. So as far as the porn addiction standpoint, yeah, you could function in society with this for decades. And so it's looked at a little bit differently. But the challenge is it becomes a coping tool that you can't go through life without using. And so a lot of people just want someone to stop. I just don't think that'll work. It's not realistic. What is realistic? Create new habits. But creating new habits is hard. Everybody wants the easy, right? We want the easy button. There's no easy button. Get over it. You want a life that's satisfying? You want to actually get satisfaction? Create new habits. Get some hand holding, get some help. Don't try doing it on your own. I didn't do it on my own, but get some habits. All right. Is this Christian propaganda? A lot of people that so funny that somebody watched this video. And anyway, I like your comments. This is great. Is it Christian propaganda? I'm not suggesting people become Christians to overcome porn. I'm suggesting that having a connection on a spiritual level, whether that means go out and sit in nature and get very, very still and listen within, whether that's praying, meditating, whatever that is for you, incorporate this aspect of our life, because there is this unseen aspect of our world, and I think it's a big part of recovery. You can try and recover without it, but Alcoholics Anonymous does it, right? You lean on a higher power. Just call it whatever you want. The word water never got anyone wet. It's the substance that we refer to. And so when I say God or Jesus or Allah or whatever name, whatever vibration we make, I'm just referring to the essence that holds everything together and makes life possible. Connect with that. Let's see. Am I addicted to religion? Yeah, I can see people get addicted to religion. It's funny. I love the rawness of the internet. Isn't it awesome that there can be such raw comments that we wouldn't normally say to each other, but in an anonymous format we can say whatever we want. I love it. Do people get addicted to religion? Yeah, absolutely. It becomes their crutch, becomes their fix, and they can't cope without it. And can religions be helpful? Yeah. Can they also be harmful? Absolutely. They can lock people down and keep them asleep. And my suggestion is that you stop determining whatever your spiritual beliefs are based on what other people told you, myself included, and you start determining it based on your personal experience, because your personal spiritual experiences give you power. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do. All right. Talking about, there's a couple questions about people's relationships and not being able to talk about this because their husbands are shamed. Okay, so one last question, and then we'll end this, because I made a little rant on chick flicks, didn't I? So Jessica says, "Do you think women shouldn't watch chick flicks? Do they have the same destructive nature?" Look, I watch chick flicks with my wife. I just am real about what they are. It's kind of like this. I like watching college football. And I am consciously aware that when I sit down for a college football game, that I am plugging into 4 hours of adrenaline. It's a way for me to get an adrenaline fix. Is that unhealthy? Yeah, maybe some of my like hyper super guru friends might be like, that's an unhealthy way to cope with life. I'm still super, I'm human, right? I'm not at guru status. So I still have coping mechanisms that I use electronically to cope with life. The challenge is this. I don't know what your husband's like tolerance level for nude images or semi-nude images or love scenes or things are. For some guys, I know early in my recovery, we went to a movie. It was Galaxy Quest, which is not, now I look at it and I'm like, it's not that extreme, but it has this cleavage shot that runs for like, 3/4 of the movie. And it was just absolutely triggering me the entire movie. It was awful. Now I have a pretty high tolerance level for that kind of stuff. I don't get caught up in it. So if I watch a chick flick with my wife and there's a sex scene, I close my eyes. And I do that because we were watching some movies and they had some sex scenes, and I found myself like the first couple times that it came on, it was just like no big deal, and I kind of looked the other way because I don't want to like embed it in my mind. I don't want to see it. It's too close to porn. And so the first few times it happened, what it was, we were watching this series on Netflix, and it was some HBO series, so that ended up having some nudity in it. And we were watching it, and I saw the nudity was going to come on. It was like you kind of have a little advance notice, maybe like 2 seconds before you're like, oh, this is going to be a nude scene. So I would close my eyes. But what I found, we watched it was like 8 or 9 or 10 episodes. By about the 7th episode, I started to. There was like one of the women in the show. She was she was beautiful like most actresses are, and I started to have like this little bit of curiosity, like I wonder what her boobs look like. And and it was like, oh, well, this is like that's the steps into the relapse. So at that point, I said, I got to stop. I'm done with this series. You can finish it. I didn't even finish it. Because in recovery, what you learn is to stop way before the relapse. You stop once the impulse shows up. So chick flicks are kind of similar to that. I don't know what your husband's tolerance level is. If it triggers him, you probably should stop watching it because you're teasing your husband. Well, what's the difference in a chick flick between a chick flick and a porn? You see two people that are clearly making love, right? Shows their body, shows their back, might show their butt, right? Shows all these parts, shows them strategically on top of each other, right? I mean, it's totally stimulating, triggering. It's sex. That's what it is. But it doesn't show the breasts or the genitals. That's the only difference. So you have to decide, do they have the same destructive nature? It depends on if you are using those to check out of life. I'm not such a hard ball person to be like, don't watch chick flicks, don't do this, don't do that. You know what? You need to decide for yourself. But you also have to really consider, and I would say this to the women especially, are you setting your husband up for failure? Are you triggering him? Are you creating cravings in him that he can't talk to you about? Because if he was like, hey, honey, that chick flick you had me watch with you because you really wanted to get that instead of the action flick? Yeah, when those people were having sex, I totally wanted to look at porn, and I've wanted to for like the last 7 days because of that. What if he said that to you? Would you be able to go, oh, honey, okay, here, let's work. Are you okay? What do you need to do? Can I help you process those emotions? If you could say that and you wouldn't get emotionally wounded at all, not bugged one bit about it, and he could totally be honest and upright and straightforward and be able to say, this is what I'm dealing with, then I would be like, okay, it's probably not that big of a deal to watch chick flicks. However, if you're the kind of woman that if your husband was to say, honey, we were watching that film and that sex scene, because I told my wife that. I'm like, look, I can't do this series anymore because the sex scenes are getting me. And I don't want to go there. So I'm done. And she was like, okay, got it. Sorry about that. Are you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Oh, it's no big deal. I'm not mad at you. I'm not making you wrong. I just know when I need to get out. And I got out. And she watched the rest of it. And I didn't make her wrong for watching it. So If you can do that, then not that big of a deal. If you can't, and if you were to get offended and be like, I can't believe you have cravings for this, you're a bad person, then stop triggering your poor husband. Stop setting the guy up for failure if you can't accept what you created. That's my only point with it. You got to decide for yourself. And some chick flicks are worse than others. I just quit watching radar movies because it was just the nude scenes were just like porn. There's no difference. Zero, zero, zero difference. If you sit there and watch a movie with your husband and it shows a woman's breasts and people having sex, then that is porn, right? It may not be a porno, but what's the difference if he sits down at the computer and sees the exact same images by himself and masturbates? There is no difference. And you set it up to watch that with him. So my personal choice is I just had to quit watching radar movies, and I quit having to, I don't watch a whole ton of media. I don't have TV. I have a TV, but it's not hooked up. Like I don't watch TV. I watch some college football. That's not true. College football season comes on, I totally turn the TV on. So you got to decide for that. I don't know if there's any other questions on this thing. This has been great. I would love to do more of these. If people want to have straight talk, my commitment is to, I want to be a resource if I can be. My commitment to speak up against this issue. Even if people throw me under the bus, go ahead, because it's not who I am. Like I'm clear on who I actually am and what my purpose is. And it's going to polarize some people, and I welcome that. So if we want to do more of these, fantastic. Come on over and join us at curethecraving.com and get into the programs. Let us know how we can help you and be a resource. And let's all make a commitment to step up and be part of the solution, because that's what we need. So thanks, everybody. It's been great, and we'll talk to you soon.